I think we can start this session. सभी को नमस्कार and सेशन की शुरुआत हम इनिशियल चैंटिंग से करेंगे. कैन आई रिक्वेस्ट राजेंद्र जी, आप इनिशियल चैंटिंग कर दीजिए.
इति पिसो भगवा अर्हं सम्मा सम्बुद्धो विद्याचरण संपन्नो सुगतो लोकविदु अनुत्तरो पुरिसधम्म सारथि सत्ता देव मनुस्सानं बुद्धो भगवति स्वाखातो भगवता धम्मो संदिट्ठिको अकालिको एहिपस्सिको ओपनयिको वच्चन वेदितव्यो विन्युहीति सुपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संघो उजुपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संघो न्यायपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संघो सामीचिपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संघो यदिदं चत्तारि पुरिसयुगानि अट्ठपुरिसपुग्गला एष भगवतो सावक संघो आहुनेयो पाहुनेयो दक्षिणेयो अंजलि करणीयो अनुतरं पुण्यकेतं लोकसाति.
थैंक यू राजेंद्र जी. आप सभी को नमस्ते. तो जैसे कि आज के सेशन का हमारा प्लान है, तो सेशन की शुरुआत हम करेंगे अजान सुमेधो की एक टॉक से. टॉक का अजान सुमेधो की टॉक का जो नाम है नोबल एंड नॉइज एंड साइलेंस. ये टॉक जो है 5 अप्रैल 2021 की है. एंड इस टॉक के बाद इनवाइट करेंगे क्वेश्चन एंड आंसर्स. और आज हमारे साथ डॉक्टर धर भी हैं. थैंक यू सर फॉर joining us today. And then we will request sir answer some of our questions which we have after listening to the talk. So I'll share my screen and I will start the talk. Just give me a second. Can I request you to mute the microphone while the talk is going? Thank you. आप सभी को मेरी स्क्रीन दिख रही होगी. आई एम स्टार्टिंग द टॉक. अगर आपको आवाज ना आए तो प्लीज एक बार बता दीजिएगा.
आवाज नहीं आ रही.
नहीं आ रही, एक सेकंड दी।
दीपक जी,
हाँ जी,
एक तो आवाज थोड़ी सी लेट आएगी, हल्की सी, वो चलने के बाद आती है, एक आध मिनट रुक कर।
अच्छा,
और
ठीक है।
दूसरा, सबटाइटल्स भी आप थोड़ा सा ऑन कर दीजिए।
अब मैं सबटाइटल्स ऑन करता हूँ।
थोड़ा सा टाइम लगेगा, एक आध मिनट।
ठीक है, मैं एक बार दोबारा स्टार्ट करता हूँ वीडियो।
Ato arahato samma sambuddhassa namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa aparuta de sangama tassa tawara ye sodavanta vimunjantu satang. So listening to the silence here in the temple, I always regard it as one of my most favorite places to meditate, because the silence seems to resonate here very strongly. Silence is the background of everything, so that the thoughts, the memories, the emotions arise and cease. They rise from silence and cease in silence. So we take silence as our refuge. So they advise it to abide, to surrender and abide in the silence of the here and now. So that's a very direct teaching. Because if you depend on a temple, then you can't recognize silence in other situations. So the challenge of our lives is always to remember, abide in the silence, have that state of attentive awareness, not kind of forced attention, or you're not fixating on an object, anything, because silence isn't an object. It's broad, it's open, here and now. It's like the substratum of all conditioned, all manifested phenomena. So that's why I often encourage this intentional thinking, because the problem being with our human state is that we are thinking creatures, and we believe in the thoughts that we have. They come into our mind. We've been conditioned from the beginning of our life to think or to regard the body as a very personal entity. So that's why the first three fetters, there's 10 fetters altogether, or complete realization. The first three, the first one is Sakya Ditti, which is the sense of me, separate person, separate form. I'm, because that's how it looks right now. When you're looking at me, you feel separate from me. You identify with your body as your kind of world that you live in, with the kind of habit, patterns, emotions, memories, attitudes, and so forth that you have acquired in your lifetime so far. But silence doesn't belong to anybody, and it's not something you create. It's not like concentration in order to become tranquil. It's a kind of broad, wide open spaciousness. Like this temple is a good example of the sense of something wide open and spacious, with a high ceiling and kind of spacious room that this temple is. But so much of our lives are in kutis or, walking outside. It's a springtime, and springtime in England is very beautiful. The flowers are blooming, trees are beginning to blossom. So springtime, notice from the wintertime how just the beauty, the flowers and the greenness of the grass and all this pulls you out. You want to go and look at it and admire it. Where in the wintertime, everything, the trees, the leaves all drop off the trees, and the wintertime, the trees are barren, everything is rather bleak and silent because the animals are hibernating. So that's why I always enjoy the winter's retreats here at Amaravati, because of the kind of quietness that exists inside, outside, and then compared to the noise of one's own mind. So rather than trying to quiet the mind, trying to make it stop thinking, or trying to still it, make it so it isn't so noisy, we tend to resist. We tend to try to resist the thinking process, the negative thoughts, because we want something that we don't have. And that's one kind of desire, wanting something you don't have. So when I talk about silence, then it makes it something you want to listen to. You want to attain or get silence. So notice that, how just the recommendation of something so ordinary as silence as some kind of goal to attain in meditation, how that creates this bhava danha, or desire to get something you don't have, or something you have, something you remember having in various periods of time you'd like to have all the time. The desire to become enlightened, desire not to suffer. So desire itself is to be understood. It is a condition arising and ceasing in silence. So you can't make silence happen, but you just by learning to stop resisting, letting go, kind of relaxed, open attention, the silence comes and starts speaking to you. It doesn't have a voice. recognize the limitation of any language. It's many reflections I've made so far about language itself is conditioned phenomena. Every language, whether it's sacred language of the scriptures, or Pali, or Sanskrit, or English, Thai, French, or whatever, they all arise and cease in consciousness. In the silence, they arise and cease. And that's why this intentional thinking is a rather skillful method of recognizing the silence between the words before you think and after you've thought a word. Before you think the next word, you're aware of the silent reality of non-thinking. So that in this way, you're not just dependent upon meditation retreats or ideal venues for sitting in meditation, but it integrates into everything you do. A few weeks ago, I had to go to London to the eye hospital, Moorfields Eye Hospital in London, to have this injection in my left eye, which the doctors are trying to save, otherwise be going blind. The right eye already has no central vision. And during this time, being in the silence, sitting in the van, driving into London, waiting for the doctor, and so forth, the silence was always with me, so it's learning to, it doesn't ever leave. Once you recognize it and appreciate it and really value that, it's something you're going to bow to or really respect. It's the silence that's here and now. You may recite respectful words or Pali chants, sacred mantras, scriptural quotes, but they're all words. So not to find fault with that, but it is limited because it is words, no matter how sacred, how profound the meanings of those words might be. Whereas silence isn't profound. It's not something that has any great meaning other than liberation from the thinking mind, from the memories and the emotional habits that one has acquired. So like the second noble truth, the causes of suffering is this attachment, this blind, habitual, conditioned attachment to the three kinds of desire. So like conditioning, cultural conditioning, what do you get when the kind of culture you're born into? You don't choose it, you get what your mother and father, your family give you, hand out to you, instill in you. And as an innocent child, you just accept things, you don't question them. You start questioning life when you're, at least my experience was in the teenage, when you start investigating. You've been told all these things and assume that the priests or mother or father were right. And then in my teens, I started questioning, doubting. And doubting is the third fetter, Vichikicha in Pali. Doubting is a fetter. So can you suppress doubt once it starts? Can you just use all your strength to suppress doubt and try to believe in something? I've tried that in my teens. Tried to just suppress the doubts I felt about Christianity by just saying, just believe and don't doubt, and convincing myself that I could do that. But once you start doubting, it's because you're so attached to thinking, and thinking is so limited, no matter how profound or intellectual or magnificent it might appear or might seem. It is very limited. The conditioned phenomena can't take you to the unconditioned. Take the word nibbana, which is a common enough word in Buddhist traditions, nirvana or nibbana. And, we think of it as, we try to define it. We want to realize nibbana. So that's a desire to get something you don't have. Nibbana is an enigmatic word in itself. What does it really mean? Like Tenjokun Puttatat, a great sage of Thailand, who passed away many years ago, used to describe nibbana as cooling, the rice when it's cooling, it's nibbanaing. So something kind of mundane, like hot rice is cooling down, or nibbana is cooling down, or that's a more kind of ordinary description, doesn't make it sound terribly exciting or interesting or desirable. But nibbana is the highest happiness. So the highest happiness, it's higher than ordinary happiness. The highest happiness, like being brought up as a Christian, heaven is the highest happiness. And then I used to think nibbana is higher than heaven, so it's higher than Christian happiness. So you get caught in the kind of ridiculous word games in your mind, trying to imagine what the highest happiness could be like. So you already created an image of what has no image. There's no form, no quality, no condition to nibbana. It's a word used for release from conditioning, from letting go. Release your attachment, your grip on sankharas, on conditioned phenomena. And to be able to let go, you have to understand what you're doing, like grasping what it is, Don't be afraid to grasp, intentionally grasp, just to observe this kind of tension you create in your body, in your mind, just trying to hold on to belief or a position or an opinion. How we have to constantly reaffirm our positions in life, in society, our relationships to each other, the world that we live in. We believe that the world that we have created in our mind is the real world. Because we've been told that that materialistic world out there, everything that we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, everything we think is the real world. And the real world, what is it? It's a creation of concepts, perceptions, memories, conditions that arise and cease according to other conditions. So you can't find nibbana by trying to get there or creating an image of it. By trying to if you're expecting the highest happiness, you'll be disappointed. But language is about, this is better than that, this is the best, that's worst, that's the worst thing, that's the worse than something else, that's bad, that's good. This is how language is structured. It's hierarchical, structured, because only one word at a time you can think. You can't think two words in the same moment. So just by intentionally thinking, you try to think two words in the same moment. You can't do it. You can think one word at a time. So that's enough to recognize the space, the silence before you start thinking, after you start thinking, and eventually you become aware, even while in the midst of thinking, of the silence that's underlying every thought, every emotion that one might feel throughout the day and night. And when you take refuge in this kind of awareness. A refuge is a safe place, isn't it? When we talk about this, the English word refuge means you go someplace for refuge to feel safe. So, you know, that's, when we talk about the three refuges, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, the words themselves are limited. Buddha is a word, Dhamma is a word, Sangha is a word. But they're not pointing at themselves. They're not asking us to believe in words, but to reflect, to get beyond just the word Buddha to the reality of here and now, awakened awareness, comprehension. The moment is like this. This morning, a friend of mine from Thailand called me. He's in Thailand, and he's suffered a kind of minor stroke. And he's very interested in meditation. He would often come to see me at Wat Pa Ratanawan, who lived in Bangkok. And he's, and he's lost a lot of his memory. He's recovering now. He's at home. He stopped working. And he wants to know how to meditate, how to develop bhavana or meditation with the conditions where his memory is not very clear, where there's a lot of confusion. And, everything, his whole speech patterns while talking to me on the phone was kind of, he used the word delayed. Everything seemed to take forever to pronounce or get out of his mind. So is having a stroke, is that a hindrance to silence or losing your memory? Is that a hindrance to the path? If your path depends on having a sharp intellect and having everything defined and clearly clearly presented in words, concepts, beliefs, and doctrines, then that can easily disappear in a stroke and with old age, with dementia. So that, this is because it's acquired knowledge. It's not natural. It's not something that that you were born with. It's acquired after you're born. But consciousness, you are born conscious. And it's natural. You don't create consciousness. You can't create it. You can't even define it. For example, the two of the faculty, the earth, fire, water, air, space, and consciousness, just contemplating space. You can perceive space, can't you? So just by opening your eyes, you're looking at the spaciousness of this meditation hall. And you can see outside as space goes on and on. You can perceive it through seeing, observing with sight. So space is a perception. Consciousness, you can't perceive. Try to perceive consciousness. It's impossible to do. There's busily, scientists, psychologists busily trying to figure out what consciousness is when we're actually the living examples of consciousness here and now, each one of us. So it's nothing, you can't find it. It's like trying to find yourself. You can't find it, and you try to find yourself. You tend to identify with some habit pattern or some kind of identity, what I really am is something you believe in, some concept, some objective concept that you have decided that that's what you are, so you cling to that concept as defining yourself as a separate person. But as consciousness, can you really define yourself? Is it yours? Is it self? Is it personal? Asking questions like this So it's like investigating the reality of our existence. This it's what the Buddha encouraged. The whole power of the Four Noble Truths, his first sermon, is to investigate, to find out yourself. Bajjatang Vaitida Poanui, to see this, know this for yourself through insight, through investigation, not through believing in what the scriptures tell you or the teacher tells you. This is why, one finds such, over the years, I've used this particular teaching, Four Noble Truths, as my reflection. I remember when I was a Samanera 54 years ago in Thailand, and I read Bhikkhu Ñāṇatiloka's books on the Buddha's Word of the Buddha. I thought, this Four Noble Truths, I'm going to really take it seriously and investigate it. Because it seems simple enough, and oftentimes just reading it in English translation, you kind of understand the words, but you don't exactly know what it all means. Because you haven't experienced it, you haven't investigated, you've not taken the trip, the road sign points, at here and now. Every teaching, every sutta that the Buddha taught is pointing at the here and now, not at something to believe and grasp and hold to, but to reflect upon what grasping is. So grasping sankharas is the cause of suffering. And then you reflect, how could it be anything else but dukkha? Because sankharas are changing. And they're not self. You can't find yourself as a sankhara, as a condition. These are temporary changing phenomena that we identify with. So like your body, it's in the it's constantly growing older. It doesn't get younger. It always has problems with internal, external, dietary problems, disease, flu, COVID-19, dangerous threats from outside, fears about germs, and so forth, haunt the human mind. Modern life is so chock-a-block with information that it can be quite unsettling, when you think of the scenarios for the end of the world that are prominent now in the media. But one thing we can do is reflect on it. Like this friend phoning from Bangkok. Encourage him to reflect on to be aware of the kind of mental states that he creates through having this kind of ailment, this disability. Not to try to resist it or to just try to ignore it, but you can use whatever you're experiencing, the way, whatever, whether it's right or wrong, good or bad, or whether it's physical or mental, it's still an object. It's still a condition that arises and ceases. So what challenges life presents us with, each individual being here at this monastery is going to be different. We don't have the same four elements, earth, fire, water, and air, conditioning, social conditioning, cultural conditioning, different generations, different genders, different structures, different positions in a hierarchical system, tradition. So on the world of sankhara or samsara, the world that we create is like this. It's not judging it, because judging it is adding to something that exists the way it is right now as we experience it. It is the way it is. You can't argue with that at this moment. You can only feel the way you're feeling at this moment. You may not have chosen or even like what you're feeling, but you can be aware it's like this. And this is a kind of wide open, allowing sankharas to be what they are, rather than grasping them and trying to indulge, trying to get something that you don't have or get rid of something you have that you don't want. So the insight, when you practice using the second noble truth, the causes of suffering, is this grasping of sankharas or conditions or phenomena. And you can reflect on that. You're not just a helpless conditioned creature that can't get any perspective on grasping, on desire, because that's not what you really are. You're not a desire. You're not a physical form. You're not the emotions that you have. You're not the memories. So by contemplating this way, you begin to see that what you identify with is empty phenomena. All conditions are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. So this is a direct challenge. It's a turnabout, 180 degrees to look at something in a different way than what you've been conditioned to believe or accept or grasp. So that's why I encourage this investigation of what you're grasping. And grasp it, when you see how strong you're grasping something, grasp it even stronger, just to know the suffering you create through this grasping, this habitual grasping of unsatisfactoriness. So what can the result be? When you're blindly grasping something and it's suffering. So that's the first noble truth. You begin to understand the causes of suffering with wisdom that is available to us when we open to life, when we investigate life. And we all have to learn from the way we are, so nobody's got perfect sankharas, perfect conditions, because the nature of sankhara is suffering. It's imperfect. Because they arise and cease, they come and go, they have no stability, no reality. When we grasp sankharas, grasp phenomena, grasp conditions out of habit, out of conditioning, because that's what modern education is all about, grasping ideas, concepts from books, from teachers. Thinking is to think, to be to think logically, reasonably. When our thinking isn't logical or reasonable, we think we're crazy, or other people think we're crazy, because nonsense and irrationality is called crazy in our society. Where a normal person is logical and reasonable, a crazy person is not logical or reasonable. They're still thinking, though. But whether the thoughts are crazy or rational, high or low, they are sankharas, they are conditions that we can investigate. So my friend in Bangkok, considering his situation, what's left? Since he can't really reason himself out of the particular situation he finds himself in, he can observe it. And this is what Buddha really is, the awakened individual awareness to the reality of here and now, Dhamma. Dhamma is apparent here and now. Is not some kind of mystical concept, some kind of abstract metaphysical ideal. So keep reminding yourself, no matter how you get lost in your feelings or how many views and opinions you're grasping, they're all grist for the mill. They can be seen in terms of past knowledge, of awareness, of letting go of this intense grasping, this blind, habitual, helpless grasping that that we tend to do with the conditioned realm that we live in, the identities that we have. So as you begin to recognize the silence behind the noise, it becomes stronger, it becomes natural. You don't have to do something, you concentrate on something to realize, to rest in the silence. There's nothing to do but to begin to awaken to it and not be so intimidated and lost in the conditioned realm, the world the society that we're a part of. So that's the whole point of Amaravati Monastery, is to give this constant encouragement, to encourage you, because you can't be forced. Intimidating you into believing this doesn't work. By intimidating you, then you become more, caught in the sense of someone who's being intimidated by somebody else. That doesn't work. So threatening you with bad results, with going to some kind of hell when you die, or holding up some totally miserable scenario if you don't behave yourself and obey all the rules and accept everything humbly and nobly, which is an ideal. But we have to deal with the way we do feel rebellious, or we don't agree, or these things arise that we can use in practice. So it's not always trying to fit into an ideal mold of monasticism. That doesn't work. It's taking the way you are, the conditions you find yourself thinking, your personality, your habit patterns, your cultural identities, your views about Buddhism, views about human rights, and noble views are still views that one grasps. So have this kind of courage and willingness to talk about the dark side or the shadow side. I remember years before when I was in the Navy, I was reading books on psychology. I was in my early 20s and I was terribly interested in psychology. They talk about the shadow, the dark side. And I was brought up in this very strict Christian ideal, about being Christ-like, saint-like. And so the dark side was very frightening. They talked about the shadow. I became rather threatened and frightened by that. When psychologists, I think Carl Jung talks about the shadow, the dark side of human nature. But I remember being fascinated by that. I was afraid to find out the dark side. I remember standing one night we were out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. I was standing on the fantail, the rear part of the ship. It was at nighttime, there's no one around. And I wanted to throw myself into the Pacific Ocean, get it over with. Because I found, I felt so scared of finding out something I didn't want to know about myself from reading these books on psychology. So I stood there, just looking into the water as the ship was going along, and it was dark, and I thought, by the time they find out I'm gone, I'll be eaten up by sharks or fish. Nobody will ever find me again. I thought that would be peaceful, to just jump into the middle of the Pacific Ocean and drown, rather than, because I didn't know what to do about my fears. And so then I had this image. My mother came to visit me in a dream, in a kind of visual dream. And I thought, oh, they'd absolutely break my mother's heart if I did this, so I won't do it. So I thank my mother for... But then, it did awaken something in me, this possibility of looking at something evil or terrible inside oneself in a way that wasn't threatening. That one isn't what you're thinking or the memories you have or the fears, that you're not limited by all these kind of emotional habits that we acquire. That we have a good side and a bad side, but they're both conditions, phenomena that arises and ceases. And so suddenly, by reflecting just in this simple way, you're more brave to challenge life, to look at it and use the way you are, the kind of characters you have, whether you're aggressive or passive or you're positive or negative, you're depressed or you're elated by excited and think life is wonderful. These are conditions that arise and cease and change. And what is mindfulness allows us to be aware of change. Mindfulness is that open door to the deathless. So you begin to experience a kind of fearlessness when you really appreciate what we have. And the way one is, you might not like yourself very much, or you might think you're better than somebody else. But even that is conditioned, isn't it? To consider oneself superior to others is still a thought, a habit pattern. Arrogance, conceit and arrogance are conditions that arise and cease, or feeling inferior, you're not good enough, you haven't enough barami, you haven't enough accumulated virtue or grace to really become enlightened, or you can really despise yourself because you're not perfect. But all these conditions, no matter what way you operate, exaggerating the positive and exaggerating the negative, exaggeration is proliferating on it, making something more than what it is. So arrogance and conceit is like this. Ideal for a Buddhist samana is not to be arrogant or conceited, so that's the ideal. But sometimes we are arrogant and conceited, and that's still Christopher the Mill. It's something to observe. It's like this, not to say I shouldn't be arrogant, and then you're adding to it. You're making it so personal. I should be humble. I shouldn't be arrogant and think I'm better than somebody else. Is going to holding up an ideal, but not opening to what's really happening, to the way it is. Or to feel inferior, to feel you're not good enough, or not clever enough, or not beautiful enough. You haven't enough virtues to really live the monastic life. I've heard that from many people. Those of us who live the monastic life have accumulated a lot of virtue so we can develop the path. And that's all rubbish, garbage that we create in our minds about who's developed and who isn't, who's advanced, who's virtuous, who isn't, who's selfish, who isn't selfish. All these words arise and cease in everyone's consciousness. So you begin to see there's nothing to fear. Fear is, imagining something dark and dangerous, humiliating or repulsive or dreading, that you imagine. There's a natural fear that arises for survival of the fittest. So when a tiger starts chasing you, you run. You don't just stand there and observe it. Because the conditions there are obvious. They speak for themselves. A tiger is a very dangerous creature to have, takes an interest in you, which is not something to your benefit. But so much of our life, like here in Amravati, we don't have to deal with bears and tigers and spies and terrorists, things like that are quite prevalent in other places. Everybody here has is committed to the precepts, kind of moral integrity that we use to observe. It's not something to grasp and identify with, to feel you're better because you keep the precepts better than somebody else, and that becomes conceit. But to observe the weaknesses that we have, or they are what they are. But when you see them as personal, my weaknesses, then you're adding to it. Feeling tempted, feeling weak is like this. So you're seeing it for what it is. And you can also observe how you tend to identify with it, like, if a samana should be strong is the ideal. So the samana should be strong is high-minded. It's still a sankhara, still a condition. So this way, even from our weaknesses or our bad habits, we learn from by investigating, by observing the attachment, either through blindly following or resisting them. Vipavandanha, the desire to get rid of something. Passing judgment on yourself as a person, a separate person, whether you're a good or bad person, right or wrong person. This is proliferating with thought when we identify like my anger, my greed, my weaknesses. This is, I'm adding something to, I feel a weakness, a temptation, a weakness, and I can be aware of that. When I'm aware, I don't add to it with I'm weak. Feeling weak and tempted is like this. And then you have the precepts that help us to not act on unwholesome feelings or intentions. So we learn to restrain ourselves with the Vinaya discipline, with the precepts. But they're not for grasping in some kind of personal endeavor to be virtuous, but they're skillful means towards awareness, towards awakening. So now that the winter's retreat is over and spring has sprung, and people, there'll be more movement, more socializing. Don't see this as some kind of degeneration of practice. Seeing retreat is the only time you can practice is still another view that you might be grasping. But see, every moment is awareness operating here and now. So I offer this for your reflection.
Okay, so we will like to open the forum for discussion. If anybody has any questions after listening to this talk, then they can unmute themselves and ask the question. So there is a question from Corinne Matthews. So I think the recording is public and is available to everyone to see it again. It's the link of the recording is there in the WhatsApp notification which we sent for this. So Anishji, can I invite you to share your learning from this talk?
Friends, as you are aware, for the last 2 or 3 sessions, we were playing a talk given by one of the senior Ajahns, which had an impact. And with this talk by Lumpo Sumedo on noise and silence, is a very the way he puts it of consciousness. It's a very right word to put. Nice is not the right word. It's just the way it is. And over here, the silence that he's talking about, you have a noisy mind with your thoughts, your memories, all the time playing. And, at the same time, when we are meditating, we are also conscious about our body, our sensations, जो वेदनाएं हैं, मन में जो विचार आ रहे हैं वो भी चले जा रहे हैं. और एक जो लुम्पो सुमेदो का एक बड़ा प्रभाविक मुझे जो लगा है, जो उनकी जो सिखाते हैं, एक ये साउंड ऑफ साइलेंस जो नाडा साउंड है, और इसके ऊपर मैंने जब जो लुम्पो ने ये एक ध्यान का आलम्बन दिया, मैं सबको यही I will just tell people to try meditating with the sound of silence, with the nada sound, and the silence which is there all the time. And it is like a theater, you see, it's like a screen, and on that screen you have that silence there, and all these things are, your thoughts are coming, your memories are coming, and what Ajahn is saying is just so profound. You know, it's a different way of looking at the way we are meditating. We're not trying to achieve anything. It's just there. Yes, but the mind it gets distracted at times, but you have to keep trying and getting there. And I found this talk by Ajahn very, very, very helpful in your outlook towards how we look at how to meditate. So I found this talk very, very helpful for me. That's why I had suggested the group that we should put this talk forward, and maybe it will help many people, and it helped me a lot in my meditation also. So, that was my take from this. So if anybody else would like to give their take on their method of how they are practicing, it would probably help us also to understand your things.
5,000 रुपया आया.
Thank you. Just a sec. Let me mute. Okay. Thank you, Anishji, for sharing your understanding from the talk. Rajendraji, you want to say some words?
I have a question actually. You know, there's one sentence which he spoke. Silence is broad, it is open. It is basics of all manifested phenomena. ये जो sentence है, इसको यदि explain कर सकता है तो बताएं. I will repeat. Silence is broad, it is open, it is basics of all manifested phenomena. And then he says we are a thinking creature.
So, sir, can we request you to answer?
I have come here to listen today.
Okay.
Because this is a discussion, interaction, so let discussion go on. If at the end something is needed, I'll add it. Let the other people participate in the interaction. We don't make it into a question answer session.
Yes.
So basically what I was trying to understand, because there's a lot of things which are easily understood. For example, when you say noise and silence, so one does understand that it is the mental. Somebody wants to speak about it, please go ahead.
No, I think there is some background.
समझे कोई बोलना चाहे तो मैं ये समझ रहा हूँ कि जो नॉइज एंड साइलेंस की जब बात होती है दोनों को मिला करके, और ये कहा जाए कि जो नॉइज है उसमें भी साइलेंस को ढूंढना, यानी जैसे ये बड़ा अच्छा भी अनिल जी ने भी बताया कि हमारा मन जो है वो तो 24 घंटे सोचता ही रहता है और परेशान होता है, और ऐसी स्थितियां आती हैं जहां पर कि हम घिरे हुए हैं और बहुत शोर भी हो रहा है, लेकिन उसके बावजूद हमारा मन जो है जरा सा भी नहीं भटकता और जरा सा भी उसमें कोई रोष पैदा नहीं होता। और कई बार हमने देखा है कि बहुत सारे लोग बातचीत कर रहे हैं और हम चुप हैं, हम सुन रहे हैं उसे, और लेकिन उसका कोई इम्पैक्ट नहीं पड़ रहा, प्लेजेंट या अनप्लेजेंट, कुछ भी नहीं हो रहा है। आप सिर्फ बैठे हुए हैं और उनकी बातचीत सुन रहे हैं। सो आई थिंक एट दैट टाइम ऑल्सो वन इज dwelling in silence in spite of the discussion being there. तो perhaps मेरी जो समझ में आ रहा है वो ये है कि the situations where you are confronted with things which you don't like we are being said, you know, then or you don't understand it, तो वो भी एक किस्म का नॉइज है कि आपको समझ में नहीं आ रहा या आप उससे इरिटेटेड हो रहे हैं, जो कहा जा रहा है वो आपके चिंतन के हिसाब से नहीं है। वहां पर यदि मैं रिएक्ट नहीं कर रहा हूं और मैं चुप बैठा हूं और कोई प्रतिक्रिया नहीं दे रहा हूं, तो वो भी एक किस्म से एक साइलेंस मुझे लगता है, क्योंकि मेरे मन में कोई भाव नहीं आ रहा और मैं अपने मन को बिल्कुल समता में रखे हुए हूं, तो वहां पर भी वो एक किस्म से रियलिटी ऑफ नॉन थिंकिंग, ये बड़ा अच्छा शब्द हसन ने कहा था अभी कि साइलेंसिंग माइंड रादर देन बीइंग बॉदर्ड बाय आउटसाइड नॉइज। सो कहानी सारी यही है कि जो कुछ है वो प्रतिक्रिया हमारे मन से होती है, और यदि मैंने रियलिटी ऑफ नॉन थिंकिंग को समझ लिया और मैंने अपने मन के अंदर प्रतिक्रिया न करने का संकल्प कर लिया, तो साइलेंसिंग माइंड बहुत आसान हो जाता है। तो देयरफॉर जो ये मैं सवाल कह रहा था कि साइलेंस इज ब्रॉड, इट इज ओपन, इट इज बेसिक्स ऑफ ऑल मैनिफेस्टेड फिनोमिना। तो अब मैनिफेस्टेड फिनोमिना की जब बात हम कर रहे हैं और उसके बाद हम साइलेंस को उसके साथ जोड़ रहे हैं, तो ये this is something that needs to be understood.
Thank you.
But बार-बार उन्होंने इस बात पे ही ध्यान दिया है कि silent reality of non-thinking. This is what he has said quite many times. जी.
Yeah. So, राजेंद्र जी, I think एक चीज जो मेरा पर्सनल जो मेरे को समझ में आता है जान सुमितो की टॉक सुन के, जिसमें जैसे आपने बोला कि एक तरह का माइंड को रिएक्ट नहीं करना और माइंड को साइलेंस करना, उसमें जो मुझे समझ में आता है कि कई बार जान सुमितो इस तरह से कहते हैं कि rather than trying to force towards के माइंड साइलेंट हो जाए या माइंड में पीस आ जाए, माइंड नॉन थिंकिंग की स्टेट में चला जाए, उसमें माइंड में जो भी हो रहा है, क्या हम उसको इस तरीके से देख सकते हैं कि इन साइलेंस वो थिंग्स आर अराइजिंग एंड थिंग्स आर फेडिंग अवे। या जब वो चीजें हम उस तरीके से चीजों को देखने लगते हैं, तो वो अपने आप को उस डायरेक्शन में लेके जाता है कि माइंड साइलेंस हो जाता है। बट इट्स नॉट दैट वी आर ट्राइंग टू फोर्स समथिंग, वी आर जस्ट ओपनिंग to the silence or opening to the space, and then we see things arising and passing away, and as a byproduct we go towards non-thinking or the mind becomes calm. So that is my understanding, but I will open के कोई और भी रिक्वेस्ट करता हूँ कि राजेंद्र जी ने जिस तरीके से कहा, अगर उसमें आपकी भी कुछ अंडरस्टैंडिंग है तो प्लीज unmute your mic and you can share.
Deepak ji, I think that two hands raised. Maybe we can invite them also to.
Yeah, yeah. So there is one hand raised by Mrs. Ekta Chahar. So, ma'am, you can unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
Hello everyone. Hello sir. So this is my first time attending this Sunday session and I'm so glad that I attended it. But uh, since you all are experienced in this, I just wanted to ask what is the best way to practice all these things that are taught? Like, should I be making notes and then try to inculcate one thing at a time in my daily activities, or is there some other way to make the best out of all the teachings? Because like there is so much to know and learn, and we all know that there is so much we can do to better our lives, but it's really difficult to add it in our daily life. So from your experience, I would love to know like what is the best way uh, to use these learnings in our life.
So, very good question, and I'll invite others to also help in sharing how they have been in this path of learning. Personally, what I will say is that regularly listening to the teaching of uh, Thai forest uh, Ajahns, especially teachings of Ajahn Sumido, teaching of Ajahn Cha, teaching of Ajahn Amro. So you can find some of these talks in our YouTube channel, and or in general in YouTube or on Amravati, you will find a lot of talks. So that is one of the resource you can use. And I think rather than trying to make it a goal oriented or step oriented, trying to understand what is being said and let that teaching take you in broadening your learning. That will what I will suggest. And the second resource which I tell you is that on our YouTube channel, we have a playlist of teachings of Buddha by Professor Darvi. There is a series of sessions step by step where uh, uh, we have gone deep into the teachings of Buddha from the basic to in more detail. So, trying to do this learning, listening to them is one step I will say. And we have our meditation sessions, being part of the meditation session regularly can help you. And I'll open this question for others to help Ekta ji.
Ekta ji, have you had any past experience in meditation? Have you done some meditations before? Maybe ask.
Yes, sir. I have attended one Vipassana session, I think 2 years back. And after that, I have tried to meditate regularly, although it is not as regular as I would want it to be. But I try to take out time once in a while to meditate and to practice it.
Very good. Very good. So keep in touch with this group. I think step by step, we are also all walking on the same path. So we cannot claim that we are any great experienced people. I think we will all help each other to try and walk the path as far as possible. On the question of Rajendra ji, I would like to put a point across to the entire group is, especially with this talk, I have been meditating, and many a times when I have been meditating and I have tried to calm my mind, tried to silence my mind. And in the bargain, what happened was that I was getting more agitated or more, I was getting, because I wanted to calm my mind and there was an I, and I had created an I in me, and who wanted to calm the mind, or who wanted this, or who wanted these kind of sensations, or he wanted these experiences. And in the subconscious, you had that undercurrent playing. Where Ajahn is coming from is this state of non-self. You know, it's anatta. It is what it is. That's it. There is this the stillness flowing. The mind, there is all this chatter in the mind all the time. You know, the thoughts are going on, memories are going on, your thoughts are coming, your sensations are coming, and all he's saying is just you're observing it, and that's the silence. The observer is the silence over there. And so that's the beauty of this whole thing, and he's made it look so simple. And just trying it, the simplicity of it, rather than complicating the matter, we complicate the matter in our own way of how we want to look at things. Because there is that there is this I that we have created, that I want to, मतलब कि एक घंटा अभी मैंने अधिष्ठान में बैठना है, तो मतलब हाथ नहीं खोलूंगा, पैर नहीं करूंगा, और you know that adhishthan is there, and then you know sometimes you're fighting with it, and sometimes when you achieve it, when you are able to sit that 1 hour, you feel that, oh wow, fantastic, I achieved something. और एक दिन कभी आप उड़ गए तो you feel very dejected, अरे मैं हार गया, ये क्या हुआ. So that over here we are just talking is that just observing. And what helped me a lot was try to work with the object of the sound of silence. One of his books is there it's written by Ajahn Amro, Sound of Silence. It's available on Amravati website. Please download it and try to read it. It's a very, very, and this is what Ajahn Sumedo was talking, and it really helped me a lot. So that's what I wanted to share with the group. I think there's somebody else who's raised his hand, Deepak ji.
Yeah, so thank you, Anish ji, for sharing your understanding. So there is a question from Corinne Matthews, so we'll request you to unmute and ask the question.
Sure. Thank you very much. I found today that I was taking notes, and this was really very engaging talk, because there were many, I mean, at least 2 levels, but it was very real, and it came, I think, out of his real practice. So for Ekta's question, I thought I had 2 answers, and then of course I had my own question. Ajahn talked about like the winter time and the springtime, and he made the distinction that during the springtime, it's almost like what's happening now in India, that everybody wants to come to Manali, or you know, there's this natural blossoming where everybody wants to step out into the noise. So I found that Ajahn saying that wintertime, you can cultivate the silence inside and outside. It's kind of a natural silence and an opportunity. So maybe to look for that, not the season, but to see that happening inside and outside. And also I found that he said that even within the noise, all this chatter, there's a silence between the thoughts. So he encouraged that, find that and practice that throughout, day and night. So I thought there were these 2 answers in his talk. And then I'm sorry, I don't know the names, but someone talked about like what was the silence behind the noise. And Mikobi, I found that this was a very good question, and I also had a question there, because I think Anish referred to that there is nothing to achieve. Like it's almost like an inactive process. So Ajahn is saying that we feel blind and helpless, and then we get lost at this grasping, at this conditioned phenomena. But is he also saying that this resting in peace is inactive? Or is that an active kind of a resting? So that's also my question. between this intimidation, he's saying, don't intimidate yourself, and then don't be lost. But in this in-between process, is this an active process of resting? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wants to answer that?
I would like to,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
see, there is always, Ajahn Sumedho has laid a lot of stress on a statement which he says very often is letting go. So when you talk of letting go, then there is no question of intimidating yourself. The point is that the thoughts will keep on coming, and they will be both unpleasant, pleasant, and sometimes neutral also. If we are not aware about things, we do get disturbed. And even that disturbance should not disturb us. The point is that, yes, it's easier said than done, but a lot of practice is required for such things. And I'm also just a student, a beginner in this matter. But this is very clear, and it happens very nicely because the more one starts learning about it, and because when we say bhavatanha and vibhavatanha, and we say kam tanha, now these desires to be or not to be are also, sort of disturbing events when for a peaceful mind, because again it is a clinging, it is a desire to be something. Or when you say that I want to make my mind peaceful, okay, fine, I sit down. But if I am sitting with this intention that I have to make my mind peaceful, and suppose if thoughts keep on coming and they are quite disturbing thoughts, and I am in my mind, if I'm disturbed about it, oh, I'm not peaceful. These thoughts are disturbing me. So then things will worsen rather than becoming what they should be. So basic thing is that whatever is happening, I'm just an observer, observing what is happening. I'm neither giving importance to it nor ignoring it. It is a natural thing which is happening. Thoughts are coming, and I know after some time the thoughts will go. Each will go, each will come, each will go. So this process will keep on happening. So my practice needs to be how best I become an observer, and through my awareness that I can develop. So thrust is on developing awareness. And I think the entire teaching of various ajahns is on this particular aspect, how to develop our awareness.
Thank you, Rajendra ji. And I think Poonam ji, I think you wanted to say something. Poonam Atte ji.
जी. Maybe I'll speak a little later. I'll just speak. I had thought I'll just speak.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Rajendra ji. Anyone else wants to?
Can we also let Ekta ji know that we meditate in the morning and evening for 1.5 hours, and if she would be interested to join us, you could send her details about it.
Yeah, sure, sir. I would love to join.
Right. Please share your details with Deepak ji. He will then send you the link for those sessions.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. And I think Deepak Yadav ji, you want to say something?
जैसे अनीश जी ने बताया, तो इसमें कोई रेजिस्ट नहीं करना चाहिए. जो मेरा टेक अवे है इस उससे वो ये है कि उन्होंने कहा है आचार्य सुमेधो जी ने कि लिबरेटिंग ऑफ थिंकिंग माइंड, साइलेंस इज ए लिबरेटिंग ऑफ थिंकिंग माइंड. and you cannot make silence happen, but you just by learning to stop resisting, letting go, kind of relax, open attention, the silence come and starts speaking to you. तो वो एक कन्वर्सेशन है जो एक पॉइंट मुझे लगा कि ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है कि जब साइलेंस आपसे कन्वर्सेशन करती है, but it does not have the voice, and it has the limitation, or limitation है, and moreover it has the it does not have any language. मतलब इसके लिए कोई साइलेंस के लिए किसी लैंग्वेज की भी जरूरत नहीं है. लैंग्वेज हैव द कंडीशन, हैज द लिमिटेशन. तो साइलेंस हर चीज में आपसे टॉक कर सकती है अगर इफ यू अलाउ हर हिम अलाउ इट. एंड सेकंड चीज उन्होंने जो बताई कि उनके एक फ्रेंड को स्ट्रोक हुआ एक, और वो लर्न करना चाहते थे. तो अजान जी ने ये बताया कि आप उसको भी लर्न उस स्टेज पर भी, जबकि आपका माइंड पूरी तरह से हेल्दी नहीं है, आप उस स्टेज पर भी लर्न कर सकते हैं बाय एक्सेप्टिंग द सिचुएशन एंड डिसेबिलिटी ऑफ द माइंड. ये उन्होंने एक जगह कहा जो मेरा टेक अवे की बहुत मतलब मुझे लगा कहने में. थर्ड उन्होंने जो बताया एक लास्ट के उसमें था कि अगर हम किसी चीज को सोचते हैं कि हम आई एम नॉट गुड एनफ, तो ये भी हम मतलब वो हम अपने माइंड की हमारी संकारा है जो हम लोग हैबिट से कह दो या पैटर्न कह दो या हमारी थिंकिंग है विच इज चेंजिंग एवरी नाउ एंड देन. तो उन्होंने कहा कि इसका भी कोई मीनिंग नहीं है कि आई एम नॉट गुड एनफ, और इफ समवन थिंक्स कि ही इज बेटर देन अदर, तो कंपैरिजन किया कि वो औरों से बेटर भी है. तो कह लगे दोनों का ही कोई रेलिवेंस नहीं है. तो मेरा टेक अवे तो मेरे ख्याल से ये मेरे जो मुझे इम्प्रेस हुआ और मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा वो ये चीज लगी. थैंक यू.
Thank you, Deepak ji, and I see that we are about to reach the time, but I think if before inviting sir, yeah, I let
सॉरी
Poonam ji. Yes.
एक सेकंड. हाँ जी,
Yeah, yeah,
सॉरी
please.
एक सेकंड. मेरे को जो थोड़े मैं अपना वो एक फॉर्मुलेट करती थी, जो मेरे को समझ में आया था कि that he is emphasizing more on the you know like one space between thoughts, even with words, even within word also. Like he has given this example of ailing one of his ailing friend, and he has that problem. So I think so what he was emphasizing was on the space, that space between the thoughts to be recognized. Not just recognized in the sense we have to practice basically. And yeah, that's I think so for me it was the thing I wanted to take away, which I took. Sorry.
Thank you, Poonam ji, for your reflections. And so I think I think Kuren ji has raised his hand. So I think the second last thing will listen to you from Kuren ji, and then we'll hand it over to sir. Yeah, Kuren ji. Yes, you can speak.
So yeah, thank you very much. I have a quick question. One of the things that Ajahn said is even this conditioned phenomena, whether it's emotional body, of calling something crazy, it's not crazy, and even the irrational is not irrational. So what are we trying to do here? Like this idea that noise se dur jaye, that we are trying to get away from noise, but he's saying that even the noise is not noise really. So why are we creating this hierarchy, this linear kind of a direction? We have to move away from noise, move away from something, because Ajahn is saying even that is an emotional conditioning. So a limited question, if someone could answer quickly. Thank you.
Okay. I think it's already 5:35. So Deepak ji, Deepak Tyagi ji, we can I will take your question next time. So I'll invite Sir. Sir can share his thoughts and also answer about the last question.
We have to understand that there are two approaches to practice. One is the goal-oriented approach and the other is the source-oriented approach. So what Lungpo is teaching us is a source-oriented approach. And what is the source which he is pointing out? It is the consciousness, the what he calls as awakened awareness. And he, again and again in various talks, he says we should trust in awareness, trust in awakened awareness. And when he refers to silence, it means trusting in that awareness, which is unshakable, which doesn't shake, because that the characteristic of that awareness is that it just knows. It doesn't get disturbed by what it knows. It's like a mirror which reflects everything. That's the analogy which is given. So the silence refers to the silence of that consciousness, and that awakened consciousness, which, and what Rajendraji said, the whole phenomenal world is actually a manifestation of that consciousness. That consciousness operating through various sankharas produces the whole multifarious world, but the play of, that's why in some traditions the whole world is called a play of consciousness. And so silence would be abiding in that, and noise would be when we abide in what is reflected in the consciousness. What is reflected in consciousness is the what it captures through six senses. So that's why the forest Rajans keep on telling us that we should, when we observe something, the object of observation is good. We start from there. We see the object of observation. It could be breath, it could be body sensation, it could be sound, it could be smell, taste, it could be thought. So they are all objects of observation. What is observing them? Okay, is the consciousness behind, the awakened consciousness, which is the subject, so to say. Now that subject cannot be objectified, and that is really the key difficulty in this source-oriented approach. So what is suggested is that whatever is happening in the mind level, mind is restless, but that does not mean it is not, one cannot be silent with a restless mind. If you would recall, in Satipatthana Sutta, the Lord says, Nathi me ajjatang sati sambhojangam, nathi me ajjatang sati sambhojangam, tamti pajanati. साधक जानता है कि मेरे में सती नहीं है, मन बिल्कुल डिस्ट्रैक्ट हो गया है, बट जो साधक ये जानता है उसका माइंड साइलेंट है, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ रहा उसको, उसका जो अंतर है, he is actually abiding in silence and observing the noise of the mind and whatever is happening in the mind. So that is the way I understand noise and silence. And it is this silence, the awakened awareness or the pure consciousness or the chitta, jaise ajancha, ajanman kehte hain chitta, which is outside the five khandas, which is again a special feature of the Thai forest tradition. I keep on reminding ourselves that it's not part of orthodoxy, but it is within our experience, so we can feel it. So that the awareness is always remaining there. And if we can disidentify awareness from the object of awareness, we naturally move towards silence. We don't have to do anything to get silent. And that's the kind of a practice we can do. And how do we really do that? It's an intuitive way of doing. We can't really objectify the consciousness because consciousness is the subject. So we do the observation, say open awareness, And whatever is arising in the mind and the body, through various sense doors, we become aware. That's it. That's it. And as the Lord keeps on reminding us, Nai tad mam, nai soham asmi, na mai sohattati. This is not me, not mine, not myself. So by reminding ourselves again and again of these facts, we get disinterested in that, what is being projected in the object of awareness. So that nibbida arises, disinterest in the object of awareness, that naturally moves us toward the source. And as we move nearer and nearer to the source, then you get some intimations. You get some intimation. Then you can see that, yeah, there is that possibility of deep silence in spite of the noise in the surroundings. And that is this silence which he hinted as between thoughts, or beginning of a sound, ending of a sound. With sound, it's very easy to feel it. So if you are meditating and an external sound arises and you're very attentive, you'll notice the sound arising, passing away, silence before, silence after. You can very easily feel it. So you note that, yeah, there is being aware of the objectless awareness. Objectless awareness can be felt in that sound mode. With body sensations, because of our practice, they're constantly there. So you can't really see their cessation so easily unless you have really practiced. The mind has been quietened down to such an extent that the body sensations also arise gently and pass away. And then you can see that also. So that's my brief interaction on this subject. I hope it will be helpful.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for sharing this. And so we are out of time for today. And so we'd like to close this session. Rajendra ji will request you again to do the closing homage.
Sabbe satta sukhi huntu, sabbe huntu chakhe minu, sabbe bhadrani pasantu, ma kinchi papam agama, ma kinchi sokam agama, ma kinchi दुःखम आगमं भवतु सब मंगलं रखन्तु सब देवता सब बुद्धानुभावेन सदा सुखी भवन्तु ते भवतु सब मंगलं रखन्तु सब देवता सब धम्मानुभावेन सदा सुखी भवन्तु ते भवतु सब मंगलं रखन्तु सब देवता सब संघानुभावेन सदा सुखी भवन्तु ते अरहं सम्मा सम्बुद्धो भगवा बुद्धं भगवन्तं अभिवादेमि साक्षातो भगवता धम्मं नमस्सामि सुपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संघो संघं नमामि।
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining to this session.
Thank you very much. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you. Thank you.